We are back on Sunday Sports Extra. Action Force Sports Director Clay Williams, Action Force Sports reporter Brendan Fitzgerald talking about the best of the best from the season that was in the Rio Grande Valley high school football season. Let's start by talking about Valley MVPs. And really, the entire year coming in, Brendan, we knew there was one guy who was going to make a big play at this, and it was the guy we expected.
Yeah, Matthew Kaufman, the golden boy of the Valley, I guess you could call him. And you know, McAllen Memorial wasn't a one-man team. They always wanted to stress that when they played opponents. But, you know, really, if you're the opposing coach, you're game planning for number 15, and anyone else that beats you, you would take it. But Kaufman was able to deliver every single time. And, you know, what a great career he had. Over 10,000 yards as of the San Antonio-Reagan game. Truly a special player that we'll be saying, remember when Kaufman was running the field for a long time.
And the fact that he was able to do it for 4 straight years, just incredible, and got better every single year, leading McAllen Memorial to an undefeated regular season this year. Over 100 touchdowns in his career that he was responsible for, whether rushing or passing as well.
Put him in the RGV Sports Hall of Fame. I don't know how long the wait is for years, but I think they'll be saying his name at the induction. A couple other names. Dustin Hernandez for Brownsville Pace, I thought really made the Vikings go. Aaron Munguia for Wesley Coeast, you could say one of the MVPs. A lot of players, too many to name in just a short amount of time.
And of course Harlingen, the top team from the Valley. You can't really name a MVP just because so many people did so many things for that. But if there was an MVP for Harlingen, especially on the offense, it was probably Kevin Ledesma.
Yeah, Kevin Ledesma. And I was thinking earlier today, can we do some sort of exhibition classic between McAllen Memorial and Harlingen? Because they're such similar teams. Really good defenses, a quarterback that runs and makes plays, and a lot of playmakers, great crowds. I mean, I think you could sell a lot of tickets to that one. It's too bad we didn't get to see that game this year.
I think you could. And speaking of the fact that both of those teams, Harlingen and McAllen Memorial, were undefeated this year, both going 10-0, you have to put Bill Littleton and Manny Gomez as, you know, 1 and 1A when it comes to your nominations for Coach of the Year, just because it's so tough to get your team up and get them ready every single week. These are high school kids. These coaches got them prepared, got them ready every single week. It is so tough to go undefeated, and yet Littleton and Gomez both got it done.
It's amazing that they didn't really have that look-ahead game, and to keep kids focused on the present moment, like you say. And you could see it in practice when you would go talk to Littleton or Manny in practice every week. They weren't tooting their own horn about where they were in the season, what they had done the last week. You could sense some roller coaster excitement for other teams if they were down, if they lost, if they were up, if they won. They were so businesslike, McAllen Memorial and Harlingen, each and every week. And that to me is amazing when you're dealing with kids of this age, to just keep them on target the whole season long.
All right, if we're going to another direction besides the 2 undefeated coaches for Coach of the Year, Carlos Longoria of Rio Grande City has to get a big mention as Coach of the Year. Let's call him the 4A Coach of the Year, because what the turnaround from last year, Rio Grande City went 1-9 on the season, 1 district win. This year, 6-5 overall, but an incredible 6-2 in district. And that Flower Bluff game, one of the games of the year for the Rio Grande Valley, what Longoria was able to do, nothing short of stunning.
Yeah, I would say Longoria is my pick for Valley Coach of the Year. I'll give him the Valley Coach of the Year in my eyes. You mentioned the turnaround from 1-9 to a playoff team, and it didn't take long this season for us to say Rio Grande City is definitely the 3rd best team in that district. Obviously, Ed Couchelse and Wesley Coeast, really good, but it's amazing that just through the first few weeks of the season, after they shook the cobwebs out, they got used to their new offensive scheme, we were just saying, okay, Rio Grande City's in the 3rd place spot. And for them to do that quickly, especially after the turnaround, and then bring them that close to a playoff win, not just getting to the playoffs, says something special about Longoria.
And the fact that it was a complete makeover. I mean, Rio Grande City went from the slot T that they had played for years and years. All of a sudden, Carlos Longoria comes in and changes everything, brings in a new spread offense, and he was able to do that. They took to it right away. That goes to show you what a good coach he is as well. Let's talk about games of the year, and a couple of them that definitely come to mind. And Brendan, I think you were at both of these games that we're going to talk about here. Number 1, PSJ Memorial at Edinburgh. That was an incredible game.
I'm the lucky one here because I get to go to all these games. PSJ Memorial, I think you know, what kept this from being the ultimate, maybe the Valley game of the year, is that Edinburgh still ended up making the playoffs the next week. This wasn't totally a do-or-die situation, but they kind of were treating it that way. And PSJ Memorial, from where they came, they were a young team. A lot of people had them picked 7th in the district or worse in 31-5A. They had lost their first 2 district games. They came back. This was their 4th district win in a row to clinch a playoff spot. And Coach Gus Cavasso said that he was as proud of this team as any he's ever coached. And he's coached a lot, and he's done a lot in the Valley.
They were coming at it from 2 different directions. By the way, 38-34 in 2 overtimes was the final score on that as PSG Memorial defeated Edinburgh. But they were coming at it from 2 different directions. No one expected PSG Memorial to be in that position, and yet they were pretty much in a win or go home spot against Edinburgh. Edinburgh had gone further than anyone had thought the previous year, so they thought that they needed to win and get into the playoffs, and it was just an amazing game. Like you said, both teams ended up making the playoffs, but it was a fantastic one to watch.
Sometimes those Thursday night games, they start out slow, and you say, there's not as big of a crowd there because it's not Friday night, and then for some reason, I mean, I feel like I've been to more overtime games on a Thursday night and crazy games on a Thursday night, and that held true to the pattern.
We mentioned that maybe neither of these teams were as desperate because it was week 9, but our other 4A game of the year, both teams definitely desperate. It was Roma and Mercedes at Tiger Stadium, and both of these teams needed to win to get in. Roma trying to get into the playoffs for the first time in school history. Mercedes trying to come back from incredible injuries that they took earlier in the year where they lost both their first and second string quarterbacks, and this one was everything we hoped for and more.
Yeah, and this one was another one that started out slow. Roma fumbled the ball 3 times in the first half, and I think that was a pattern for the Gladiators. Max is probably still scratching his head about this team. They made so many mistakes, and yet they were in so many ball games. They still won games, and they were only an overtime win away from making the playoffs. And I think it's just part of the process of the Gladiators moving forward. They've still got plenty of guys coming back, so I think Roma's hopes are still high for next season. But just a tremendous game. And that last touchdown by Mercedes came with a minute left to take the lead. Roma then goes down, scores a touchdown, and then Mercedes, in the final minute was a whole game of highlights in itself.
Right.
You know, and then they went to overtime.
It ended up 35-28 in overtime with Mercedes getting the win and the playoff berth. And Mercedes coach Mike Uribe has to be mentioned in the Coach of the Year discussion just for he was able to keep those Tigers up and keep them focused despite all the problems they had at the beginning of the year.
And they were young too. They were young before the injury problems.
Right.
And they were wondering, where are we going to get our offense? Is this sophomore quarterback going to do it? Are we going to have consistent offensive output? For a while they didn't, and for them to come back and battle through injuries and inexperience to come at the end of the season and win a game like that to get into the playoffs for, I believe, the 5th straight year.
Absolutely. That is definitely one of the teams to watch for next year. And speaking of teams to watch, when we come back on Sunday Sports Extra, we're going to tell you about a couple of the teams to watch for next season. 2 of them played against each other, Port Isabel and Rio Hondo. Expect these 2 to battle it out again next year. We'll talk about them and the others when we come back on Sunday Sports Extra.